It is November 1918. The heat of summer has lost its edge, and Europe begins to cool, ready for the long winter. When the ice finally falls, it will lie cold as the corpses it buries, sealing millions upon millions of freshly dug graves. A great war has torn apart the very fabric of Europe. It has raged tumultuously for 4 blood-soaked years with a fury the likes of which the world has never before seen. But now, where the soldier lies on this day in the November of 1918, the day is peaceful. He lays tucked beneath the plain white sheet of an uncomfortable hospital bed, safe in the heart of Germany. The explosions and madness and sheer hell of the front cannot be heard here. The blast of exploding shells and the crack of rifle fire and the screams of the traumatized and dying are gone, replaced by the wheezing of the recovering injured, the coughing of the sick, and the humdrum murmur of the doctors and nurses busy at work. For a man such as he, it has become an alien sensation to lay alone with his thoughts, undisturbed, without need to fear. The sun shifts gently through the window as the curtains play in the breeze. The soldier is comforted by the sight, having recently had the bandages around his eyes removed. The British gas had not claimed his vision after all. "They're saying it's over," says a nurse excitedly. A hubbub of chatter rises throughout the hospital hall. When a nurse finally comes near to his bed, the soldier calls for her and asks for clarity. "The war is over. The Kaiser has conceded to the British and abdicated. The politicians are signing the surrender." The nurse keeps moving, leaving the lonely soldier to stare at the ceiling, churning the single word over and over in his head. Surrender? He is a man who found purpose in this great war. And he is a man infatuated with purpose, just as he is his beloved fatherland for whom he serves. He is a man who would sacrifice anything to have purpose, anything for his country, for his people, and for his values. Indeed, he is a man who already has. And now the war is over, and Germany has conceded defeat. And it all happened without even losing. The soldier's purpose is void, his sacrifices meaningless, his country humiliated. In a fit of pure, pulsating, blinding rage, Adolf Hitler claws at the bedsheet and screams and screams and screams. He will never, not ever, forget this moment. The Great War, now known globally as World War I, proved to be anything but great. Spanning between 1914 and 1918, it claimed, from over 30 nations, some 20 million human lives. The role of the First World War in creating the Second cannot be overstated. This global event played a transformative role in the lives of many key figures you will learn about in the coming unit, most notably Adolf Hitler, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Benito Mussolini. The The world itself transformed in these 4 years, taking a massive step forward, technologically speaking. The armies of Europe entered World War I with rifles, horses, and cannons, and they exited with machine guns, fighter airplanes, tanks, high explosives, chemical weapons, field radio and telephones, aerial reconnaissance cameras, advanced medical technologies, and long-range heavy artillery. World War I was the first large-scale, mechanized, industrial war, and just like everything else in the world moving forward, human warfare would never be the same again. To understand the impact World War I had on World War II, we need to look at how the former ended. The First World War was a war of attrition. This means that the winner would be decided by the last man standing. In a war of attrition, whoever outlasts the enemy wins. This could mean maintaining public support the longest, or being able to feed and resource one's people the longest, or simply not being the first to run out of fighting-aged men. However, the war did not end by any of these means. In 1918, an armistice was signed to officially end the conflict. An armistice is very different from a traditional surrender. When one nation surrenders, they are essentially accepting defeat and throwing themselves at the mercy of their opponent. An armistice, however, is a mutual agreement by all combatants to lay down arms when there is no clear end in sight. Somewhere along the way, this definition became arrogantly confused by the Allied forces, most significantly their leaders in Britain and especially France, on whose territory much of the war had been waged. On the 28th of June, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in France to officially conclude the war and enact the months-long negotiations to which Germany had not been invited. The Allies treated the armistice as a surrender, and their terms of this surrender were not equal. Germany and their allies were forced to accept all blame for the outbreak of war and were forced to pay war reparations equivalent to today's $442 billion US. They were also forced to disarm their military and even give up claim to whole portions of their territory. To the uninformed, it is important to mention that Germany did not outright start the conflict, but rather World War I was a consequence of a series of military alliances made by the nations of Europe who were equally hungry to play with their new toys of war. This is Europe going into the First World War. This is Europe after the smoke had finally settled and the treaties were signed and the terms enacted. In Central Europe, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, an ally of Germany, completely collapsed. From its territory emerged the new sovereign nations of Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and the soon-to-be Yugoslavia. In the southeast of Europe and the Middle East region, the Ottoman Empire also disintegrated. Significantly reduced in size, the Ottoman Empire became the Republic of Turkey, and the rest of its territory throughout the Middle East was carved up by the British and the French and turned into colonial vassals. The current turbulent state of the Middle East can, by and large, be traced back to this British and French bipartisan decision regarding the borders of these nations, which did not account for the local population's own natural, ethnic, and cultural boundaries. In the east, the Russian Empire collapsed during the course of the war, losing much of its western territory to the new and independent nations of Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and of course, Poland. This will become relevant later in the unit, but for now, we must ask, why did Russia collapse? During the war, the government of the Tsar was overthrown by an enraged population who blamed the poverty and military failures of their country on their sovereign. The country descended into civil war. The emergent communist regime took power at the end of what is known as the Russian Revolution, and so began communism's 69-year hold over the nation's politics. Finally, there is Germany. Germany, as mentioned, was forced to make territorial concessions. They lost large portions of land to the New Poland, including the infamous Polish Corridor, a feature which will also become very relevant again later in this unit. Germany lost a portion of land to France also, to act as a buffer zone for any potential future aggression. Overall, Germany lost 13% of its land and 12% of its population. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a new power was rising. Since the 1600s, Asia had served Europe as a colonial playground, and was thought of by the European powers as very little more than that. However, between 1894 and 1895, the Empire of Japan defeated Russia in what became known as the First Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese victory is one of the catalysts that led to the crumbling of the Russian Empire, and when coupled with Japan's previous success keeping itself free from European colonization when all of its neighbors could not, proved to the world that Japan was a strong contender on the world stage. Beyond the Japanese mainland, Japan controlled a number of territories, including what is now modern-day Taiwan and the entire Korean peninsula. During World War I, Japan contributed by seizing German colonies throughout Asia and expanded its influence over China, which was at the time weak after centuries of European exploitation. Japan emerged as a global player and was even given a seat at the table during the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, a first for an Asian nation. Other nations that proved themselves during the First World War include India, Canada, New Zealand, and of course, Australia. The war helped bring these nations into the light of global power as the world expanded beyond its former European-centered balance. Of course, the real winner of this cataclysmic event, as will tend to be the consistent winner in all future global catastrophes, was the United States of America. Exiting World War I, the USA enjoyed a golden age of economic, social, and cultural domination, all leading to its status today as the by and large most powerful country in the world, both militarily and economically. It is far more than can be said for Germany. As we will learn about next lesson, Germany was forced to endure a decade of humiliation, economic stagnation, widespread starvation, and rampant political and social disorder. This perfect storm, as we will learn, is what led to the political turmoil that enabled the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, and the world would never be the same again.